sharing your personal story with us. It's very helpful. You mentioned lots of public service aspects like nursing, the army, doctor, priest. Lots of us work in kind of private sector.
Yeah.
A lot of the time there is this kind of demonisation, private sector is bad, public sector is all service-based, that's much more compatible with the Christian life. How do people that work in that kind of commercial sector where the profit aspects and that kind of thing balance the Christian?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I worked for the NHS for 2 years, and it was probably one of the most evil places in the world, actually. It was a face-fits culture. It wasn't, your promotions were not based on your ability to do the job. It was whether you had friends in high places. So,
also it's the same
in essence, yeah. I mean, I actually prefer working in private nursing homes where they're sort of small companies. But my experience does tell me don't work for too small an organisation unless you set it up yourself. The reason is you do need things like whistleblowing. And I worked for a small nursing home where the nurse manager was a bully, and my life was made hell for a year. And I had to take a demotion to become a care assistant before I could then leave. So have your wits about you. The bigger the organisation, the more the small empires develop within it, as it were. And if you're in a sort of private commercial thing, I think that's good actually. The disciples were in private commercial organisations, most of them, other than the tax, those involved in tax. But John, Peter, Andrew, and that they were in decent business firms actually. We tend to think of the disciples as being thick. It is very far from the truth. They were very capable businessmen. The fishing from the Galilee supplied a big area and was a very prosperous thing to be doing. So I would encourage you. The organisation is just because it's private doesn't mean it can't do good things. We're awful in Orthodoxy. We have no real thought to the public distribution of money. I mean, they go on about Byzantium that you gave out bread for free. Well, they gave out bread for free because they taxed Egypt for all its grain. And that's kind of, I mean, it's an exaggeration, but that's one of the reasons why they're not part of the Orthodox Church actually anymore. So, and I appreciate most of the church has been under foreign occupation for much of its time, but now we're not. It kind of sickens me that there are so many Orthodox people doing theology without action, and it's all sort of on the fathers, and there's so little about sort of public morality, actually. So I've kind of gone off on something, I'm afraid, but I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, Corinne.
From what you said, what you told us about your sort of life journey, it seems that a lot of the choices and careers you made were basically very active sort of choices that you made, decisions that you kind of pursued and that you were certain about at the time. What if you are a person who tends to kind of require more guidance from others? So to what extent can we be guided by, for example, spiritual fathers or as you said, opinions of others? Is it necessary to distance ourselves from that at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I had it tough in some ways because ever since I became a Christian, I didn't really have people to ask a lot of stuff about. For instance, I read about Orthodoxy for 5 years. There was no one I could ask questions about it to. So when I became a priest, when I became Orthodox and then became a priest, I found it quite weird that people would ask me questions about stuff. Because I was so used to having to find the answers for myself that when sort of people ask me stuff, I thought, well, why haven't you worked that out? But going back, so this time in my life where I'd gone for this interview, and it was to be a missionary in London, and it is what I'd known other people had done, and it had been really helpful to them. And so when I didn't get that, I just thought, well, what do I do? This sort of whole goalpost, the whole way that the rules of Christianity worked, were just shattered for me. I had no idea, well, what do I now do? And I started asking God. I said, right, well, I do want to take a gap year after university. Do I do Christian work in this country, or do I go off to Israel again to improve my knowledge of Hebrew and sort of do more missionary work out there? And I was asking God this for ages. I mean, months, and I got no answer. And after a while, it sort of dawned on me that there wasn't an answer, that God wanted me to do both those things. And so I had 2 gap years, and I went off and did those things. And they were very, very helpful to me. And I think, I know I'm not kind of answering your question, but orthodoxy, again, is not good in this country. There's nothing for you guys to do to test a calling, to go off and see if you've kind of almost got to sign up to become a nun. You can't just sort of go to a monastery and live there for a few months and try it out and see whether it's for you or not. It's sort of, if you don't manage it, you come back as a failure. I think that's awful. But I'm sorry I can't sort of really answer you too much about guidance. I mean, I was very fortunate. I mean, when Father Stephen knew that I wanted to become a priest, but he actually was very happy for me to go off and join a territorial army, even though he knew that meant I wouldn't be at as many services and stuff because of the weekends involved. But he knew that would give me good discipline, good training. He knew that working with volunteers, as the territorial army is, would actually be really useful as a priest. Because as a priest, it is entirely voluntary as to whether people turn up on a Sunday. And you can't actually predict who's going to be there. So all of that I had in the army was really helpful. And I'm not trying to be critical of the spiritual father process, but I think Orthodox people can be over-reliant on it. And just because you have a spiritual father doesn't mean his opinion about what kind of job would be good for you is better than your university tutor. I think is madness. Your university tutor or other people who aren't in orthodoxy can make a very good assessment. And that's why I do want to encourage, that's why I've gone through, I talk about the application stage, the job interview stage. Those things really matter. And you can listen to God through those things just as much as you can listen to God through your spiritual father. So I hope that sort of gives some idea. All right. Yeah.
How can a Christian work in an army or in a company that does research for defense? It doesn't go against, because I don't know, but to design like defense things is not.
Okay. So one of my parishioners is works in ballistics, and I told him this story, which was told to me. So during the Vietnam War, it kind of became apparent that America was supplying the ammunition to the Russians for the Kalashnikov. They were making the bullets for the Kalashnikov, so that's a 7.62 rifle. That was killing Americans. And people started to ask questions about whether they should be doing it in America. And the army in Vietnam said, no, keep producing them. And the reason was this, that if the Russians weren't buying the bullets from the Americans, they would have to go to a different source, and they wouldn't have been as well made. So the bullets, and it's quite important, if the bullet is good, it will just pass straight through. If the bullet is bad, it will cause a lot more internal damage. So I told this to George, and I said, well, actually, if you do your job well, you will save lives. And it's counterintuitive, that. But it is actually the purpose of the army. It sounds strange, but the army is there to save lives. And it may have to kill some people to do that, but that is overall what it does. It's much easier to think about it in the context of Hitler than it is to think of it in the context now, because we get so many other questions about it. But that is why, soldiers are, within Orthodoxy, are held in a special category. There are restrictions, if they've killed someone, I don't know exact rules, Father, it's
7 years.
Before they can have communion
Yeah.
again, is it? So there are different categories, but they are allowed to do what they do. It is seen as necessary for the benefit of the world, in effect.
Don't forget soldier saints.
And there's many soldier saints, yeah. And military service wasn't optional for most people throughout their lives, actually. It was just, you did it. If you're a male, you have to do it. We kind of think, we get so many questions because it's optional nowadays, and it's a career choice, or, and it's sad, really. That we don't. The sort of way the soldiers were treated when they went back to the States after the Vietnam War was a disgrace. And I can see, that they quite rightly are still bitter about that treatment now. Does that answer your question, Maria?
And what if it was optional?
So, it is optional. I still think the army is a difficult place to be a Christian. If you look at any of the films about it, you'll see that the soldiers have a lot of pornography in their camps. They do drink heavily, and it is difficult to maintain your purity in that situation, in that scenario. However, there are temptations in any walk of life, and it's counterintuitive. But sometimes, if you clearly know what the temptations are, they're easier to avoid than you might find in other ways.
Or more specifically about research on defense or things like that.
Well, again, you're going to save lives. If you do that well, you'll save lives. Actually, that's the value judgment I'm making. But the fact that the atomic bombs stopped the Second World War, it's kind of, we realised what they could do. But if they hadn't had those bombs, that war would have gone on for a lot longer and killed a lot more people, probably. Yes, George, sorry.
You said it was a fact that you just said that it's very difficult to be a Christian in the army. I think the whole point is that it's very difficult to be a Christian anyway. But we were warned about that. It's not a secret.
Yes, that's it.
Well, two things. I would echo what you said and what George just said. Maybe our calling to be a Christian, because we're called to be Christians, is not an easy calling. So it is difficult to be a Christian anywhere, not necessarily because of what is around us, but because of being a Christian in itself. If we're being called to bear our cross, to die and rise from the dead, it's not something obvious. If we're, I like my material things. If I'm called to let everything and follow Christ, it's not something easy. But yes, there are places that are even more difficult. And then I think of Saint Silouan. Keep your mind in hell and don't despair.
I think you're quite right. I have left jobs that are on the surface of them good and look good, and they have been utterly immoral. I worked as what's called an NVQ assessor for a while, and they were robbing this country blind. They were giving out qualifications on the basis of 3 visits to someone in the care home. it was evil, and it was utterly immoral. And I think, it's an exaggeration slightly, but Ofsted and the CQC, I do not think are good things.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, to live in fear of being inspected is not good. And there is blood on the hands of the CQC. I worked in a nursing home where we had someone come from another nursing home that had been shut down, and they sent this lady with no paperwork, and she died within a few weeks because of that. We know that they went to they knew everything that was going on in that Winterbourne place, where they were systematically, physically abusing people with learning disabilities. They knew all about that, and they did nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now universities are going to have to live in fear of Ofsted as well, and it's awful, actually. So you have to be careful. The beauty of the thing is that is, instead of you having to do a job for life, you have quite a lot of choice, and if something starts to transpire to be wrong, you can make a change. So that is quite a good thing, actually. It's difficult because then how do you learn the discipline of doing something that's a bit questionable?
Because there's a temptation just to leave straight away.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, if people don't want to struggle, don't want to fight for something, it's always the easy way out. Whereas actually, in my first year of teaching, I would have quit within the first 2 terms because it was so hard. But then we go back to, for me, it was a case of discussing it with my spiritual father. He was advising, and the thing we said about a spiritual father, I think it's a good spiritual father doesn't impose.
Yeah.
They offer their guidance.
Yeah.
So, and it's whether or not, and then you've got to make the decision.
And definitely, when you're getting on, when you're doing the job, that's when your spiritual father really kicks in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Rather than when you're looking for a job in the first place, I think.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Among your colleagues, when you were working as a nurse, or your fellow soldiers in the army, and when you were working as a nurse, the patients you had, have you kept in touch, and could you be of support with them? Because we know the relation, faithful spiritual father, but I suppose they know, or some of them feel, even without knowing, your calling. And did some address to you?
It's very difficult, Sasha. I treat the whole thing with a lot more discipline than that. So, in nursing, they are paying me to be a nurse. They are not paying me to be a chaplain.
Yes.
And if I am not a good nurse, that is a very bad witness.
Of course.
So that is what I try and do within nursing. I'm afraid I wasn't a good soldier. I had to, when I was at school, the whole sort of cadet force was just a DOS, and it was a joke, and you sort of tried to get away with what you could, and it was just a way to get an afternoon off from doing anything really. So that wasn't good preparation for the army. And it showed after a while, because when I did get promotion, I just thought, well, I don't want to be doing all of this. Sorry, I've forgotten your question now. Could I be of use? Could I be? You see, and
did you keep in touch? Because
it's worth you knowing. So when I started in nursing, because I do psychiatric care, and the temptation is to think, right, well, I've got to go the extra mile. I've got to do this gospel teaching. If you start doing that with certain people, you make life impossible for you and for everyone else. They will take advantage of you, and you then set the precedent that other nurses should do the same as what you've done, or things like that. And you actually have to have a sort of basic common denominator of what is good care and what is achievable for people. And if you start going beyond that, you're not actually following Christ. It's counterintuitive, but Christ didn't heal everyone that he met. and he helped. He helped some of those in need that he could. And you have to really start apportioning your time. It's about discipline. It is a discipline to be a good nurse and to do what's in common with your team. Otherwise, you're trying to be a Christian martyr or something, and it's just crazy. Sadly, I mean, when I was in the army, for instance, it was really before the time of Facebook and things like that, so I couldn't really keep in touch with people afterwards. I did keep in touch with some on Facebook and things within nursing, but it wasn't massively helpful, actually. I was supportive of a place where I worked, and it got shut down through no fault of anyone who worked there. I think sadly you sort of. My point is in Ecclesiastes there's seasons. There are, and a job can be a season. You're there for that season, and then you move on to a new season, really.
Thank you.
More questions or free time or?
We're on time, so.
Maybe one question as a non-British, maybe to you and to the rest of you. When such thing as what you were describing happens, someone left without paperwork and dying, within weeks after this, is there any? Are there some newspapers who just, don't look for sensation, but write about that sort of issues? Because
please pray for the media. It is awful. It makes our life in public service awful, actually. Because you'll get something that says the reason why people are dying is because they get sent out of hospital too early. And then a week later you'll get an article about bed blocking in the NHS, so that's people not getting out of hospital soon enough. So you're just getting these contrary opinions all the time for the sake of selling newspapers. Very little research now is done by newspapers. Very little research.
okay.
They just go from media stories, and it's the first at it. We could do with a lot better media in this country. And I'm not saying they're not bad. I mean, Panorama is fantastic. Those programs where they go in and do those exposures on things are brilliant. That's good media.
Okay.
Much of the reportage is pathetic, and I can well understand why Sincerely on the After Night didn't read newspapers and Monk Stones. I mean, they are corruptive, really.
Okay. Thank you.
So should we avoid media and newspapers press altogether?
Oh no, it's a tough one, isn't it?
Yes.
I would recommend yes.
I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, we have to know what they are doing. The Sun is written at a reading age of a 7-year-old, if that.
The sport is good in that.
But the sport is good. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, you're right. And so I don't know. I mean, discernment is jolly hard nowadays. I don't really know. I mean, I think it's very difficult. I mean, for instance, when I wanted to be an officer in the army, I had to read the newspaper. I had to know about current affairs. I was going to be interviewed on that. So I think the thing is this: if it's related to your job and you have to have a good understanding of what's going on in society, then yes, you do need to read them and be aware of what's going on. If it's unrelated to your work, then no, I wouldn't bother with them.
Yeah.
I think for me, Father, I think at the moment everything is like that. You're constantly bombarded.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you allow media read,
Yes.
you will be bombarded in every single way. Do you know what I mean? So obviously everyone's different and everyone takes it the way. Like, I'm a primary school teacher, but actually, if I was secondary school and people were asking me about this whole Brexit and whatever's going on now, I wouldn't have a clue. Because it doesn't bother. It doesn't. I mean, it probably does influence me, but not in a way that I actually care about it. In the sense of I'm a teacher, so there could be some repercussions either way. But actually, what's the most important thing? And I think.
I mean, I do think actually, those of us in the public sector, I mean, I am in the public sector as a priest, I do have a responsibility to try and work out what the Brexit thing is about, to myself and to my people, actually. The reportage on it is very odd. It is not, there's no clear statement as by either side as to what the benefits, and they each of them are portraying the benefits that cancel each other out.
And very often they're not very Christian.
Yeah,
The
not very
benefits
Christian.
that
Yeah.
are good, they're not Christian ones.
Sovereignty is a very strange thing. I don't think just because we have a sovereign on paper that it's something to maintain. I think we need to be aware of an island mentality, which we still have in this country. And we're not, I mean, when Scotland was the possibility of Scotland going off, the Welsh were very scared by that. If Scotland had separated, the Welsh would have been far worse off in the end. And that wasn't really listened to. So, I mean, some things you have to just go with your gut. I like immigration; it's good for the world, actually. Proper planned immigration. Well, I'm not saying proper planned. The fact that you can. I mean, what right have we to say that just because someone's born somewhere else, they can't have as good a life as I do? Horrid. And I appreciate you. I mean, there does need to be controls. I mean, when I lived in Israel, Israel absorbed 1 million people within 2 years, and it only had a population of 6 million in the first place. But they coped, and they sorted that out. I mean, we don't hear about that. We hear about them bombing the Palestinians and all that kind of thing. But some things that Israel have done, they've done very well, actually. And I think you've got to develop to a stage where you go a bit beyond cynicism about these things, about the media and that, and you're wary of it, and you can sort of train others to be more reflective, more wary of it, really.
Thank you very much,
you.
Father.